This is part two of Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. A few things I'd like to say before I enter through the door of part two. First of all, what is fascinating in the structure of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is you have a wise person, the ancient mariner, who's coming to a young person who's just beginning his journey in life, somewhat naive, somewhat innocent, somewhat out of touch with deeper levels of reality. Then you have this person who's not only educated in terms of information, but his life journey has shaped, massaged, and guided him. And in that sense, the very structure of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is the wise person who's tasted of life, both its best, its worst, and its mediocre. And as a result, there, as the poem ends, a sadder but a wiser man, and a young person beginning the journey. So in that sense, it's very similar to the Russian starets, the wise person, or in the early church, there was the Abba, the Amma, or the mother and the father, who had internalized wisdom and insight. And then you'd have younger people coming in asking them questions about how to go deeper, how to be more mature in their journey. And so what Coleridge is doing in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, with the mariner and the young person, he's just continuing a heritage in that sense of someone who's further down the trail, and they're quite willing to pass on what they have seen, and in terms of decisions made that lead to life, but also decisions, i.e. killing the albatross, what does it lead to in terms of a person's own soul, misguided desires, dysfunctional desires, addictions, where do these lead? The second thing to note is it's the mariner. The mariner motif of the ship takes us right back to Homer's Odyssey. Coleridge, being a very Renaissance humanist thinker in the broadest sense of the word, he's drawing from a very old heritage of the notion of the ship, the journey, women, men traveling across the water of time, inclement weather, and then how does one navigate as a community, as a group, not just as individuals. And so Coleridge is threading together a whole range of historic, literary, biblical, classical allusions that take you through Noah's Ark, and of course the nature of the church itself. Particularly classical churches are shaped in the nature of a ship, the sanctuary, very much so. So Coleridge is drawing once again in the ship motif, going back to Homer, but also the biblical notion of Noah's Ark, of which the church read allegorically. And so the church then becomes Noah's Ark that assists people in sailing through the floods, the tempests of time, and how do people live together on a ship when the weather is turbulent, and stay safe together, even though in fact it's not always easy to live together on a ship in the midst of difficulties. And personalities, temperaments collide, and yet this is obviously not perfect, but without there's the storm and there is the flood. And so Rime of the Ancient Mariner is drawing also from the ship motif. And so this is, we'll see that part one begins with the Carrick, part seven ends with the Carrick itself. I just also want to briefly touch on, which I did lean into in the first reflection, on the albatross. Of course, we can read albatross in a literal sense, but just 6 little reflections on the albatross. One would be the albatross. What do we do with, as it were, the goblins of industry and the captains of industry who pollute nature? Nature, the albatross in the sense, and for profit and wealth and prosperity, and they kill, they destroy. And what happens when, in fact, the albatross of nature is killed for the purpose of profit and wealth? Well, we are living with that as a result, with global warming. And so this contrast between an aggressive humanity and nature being the albatross that can guide, that humans can work with, live with in a symbiotic relationship, but we often kill. We kill for the purpose of profit and wealth and security, and there's a whole range of motivations. And in that sense, nature itself can become the albatross that begins as section 2 ends, it hangs about our neck. And so to be aware of the metaphorical reads of albatross. There's a couple of other reflections I had that might be interested in that. In the midst of our culture wars, the language of peace and justice is often tossed about, right? The frisbee and the political right and the political left will use the language of peace and justice, social justice warriors, law and order justice people. And what's interesting, the meaning of justice and peace is much richer, it's much deeper. But what happens is in the culture wars of the right and left, they kill the albatross of the real meaning of peace and justice. They take it captive, they shoot it, and then they use the bird to serve their own interests. And thereby, what is significant language, peace and justice, it's shot and killed to serve political interests of the right and left in the culture wars. So this is also a danger, a way of killing the albatross of something much more significant as we sail across the water of time. A third thing would be the language of knowledge and statistics and information. This can dominate at universities, it can dominate in culture. But what happens when that approach to knowing kills the albatross of wisdom, wisdom itself? And of course, the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is about wisdom, it's not about information. But in a culture that prioritizes knowledge, information, statistics, trendy media, news, what often gets lost in the whole process is wisdom and insight. And so, in the sense, a certain way of knowing kills the albatross of wisdom. And then we wonder why we're disoriented in our culture and people can't sail adequately across the water of time when Lady Wisdom or the albatross has been shot. Another one would be the vita activa. We live in a culture in which people frantically dash hither, thither, and on. They don't know how to be still. They don't know how to be silent. They define themselves by what they accomplish, what they do, how their performance, like Evelyn Underhill saying, we spend too much time conjugating three verbs: to want, to have, and to do. But the verb to be, which is the albatross, what happens when this way of understanding identity or purpose or life direction kills the albatross of being itself? And in one sense is what someone like Martin Heidegger is trying to get at with this notion of Dasein, is this openness to being, or that which is. But in a frantic culture, we often kill that albatross. It's the same story as Cain and Abel in the biblical tradition. Cain is the driven, the active, the performer, the doing, who his whole entrepreneurial tendency is bent on accomplishment. Abel is the shepherd of being. And what happens, of course, Cain kills the albatross of the contemplative Abel, and the mark of Cain is always on his forehead, and of course that has continued across time, is the be wary of the Cains who kill the albatross of the contemplative way or the wisdom way of knowing. Colerodge was very much aware of all this in his time, and so the albatross metaphor can work at various levels. I was also thinking, when you have bad religion or bad politics or bad education or bad sports, we see a lot of these things today where people take advantage of good things. So what they essentially do is they kill the albatross of good religion, good politics, good education, good sports, or whatever. And so something which is a good can be taken advantage of by egoistic, narcissistic, power-driven people, and they kill the albatross of the very good of which all of these important human activities function. And underneath that then is, in the biblical sense, it's what St. Paul calls the old Adam or the old Eve. Often we identify ourselves with that which we are not, the driven, the active, the performer, the accomplisher. But there's often much more to us than that. And that's what the biblical sense is called the image and likeness of God, and the danger. Of course, that cannot be destroyed, but it can be silenced. It can be put to sleep. That true self, which is the albatross, which guides us if we listen, if we hear, if we're attentive in the sense of Simon Weil. And so when Samuel Taylor Coleridge is dealing with the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, it's a ballad. but it's a rhyme, and he's calling forth the rhyme of the soul. And often there's dissonance in the soul. Often there's not there. In principle, there's meant to be the harmony of the soul. But when decisions are made, that harmony gets lost, that internal um, ordering of desires becomes distorted, it becomes demeaned, it becomes trivialized. And so there's various ways of killing an albatross. And Colerodge was acutely aware of it in his own soul, because in his younger life he certainly made decisions which led to questionable consequences. And in that sense, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is an outworking of some of Coleridge's early life on his journey. So let's go to the rhyme. Oh, I was going to say one more thing, which I'm not doing in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. There's a whole scholarly world of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, in which, in the 1798 edition, it was the leading poem. Wordsworth was not taken by the poem. Some people questioned whether it should actually be in the lyrical ballads. But the 1798 editions and other editions, it did not play the central role anymore. And the Rime of the Ancient Mariner went through many editions itself. I'm using the 1798 edition because I think there's a richness, there's a mother lode in that 1798 edition. But those who are interested in the scholarly unpacking of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, that's a full story of why Coleridge added, why Coleridge deleted, his clash with Wordsworth in terms of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, what became of the lyrical ballads as it went through various editions in regards to the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. But that's more if you're studying in a scholastic, a class in literature, romantic poetry, that's what we would look at a little more depth and detail, but I'm just not going to go there, even though it's a very important area of studying the various versions of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner from the early 1798 through the decades, in terms of Coleridge's revising, rethinking how it's done. So, but let's get to part two then of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. What's very interesting is we move into part two of the Ancient Mariner. The albatross has been shot, and again we can unpack the metaphor of the albatross in many ways. But initially, the mariner isn't aware of the consequences of the shooting of the albatross. Life seems to go predictably. So we do know in certain situations of life, there's immediate consequences to actions. If we put our hand on a hot burner, we know there's consequences. We burn our hand. But there's certain decisions in life that in fact we can make a decision. It's not the wisest decision. It's not the most discerning decisions. It can hurt our own soul and hurt others. The immediate consequences are not experienced. And so the mariners, the ship, and the people on the ship continue to sail across the water. The first few stanzas in part two, they continue to sail well. The wind does blow, the sun does rise, the sun does set, and the ship continues across the water of time. And so the consequences are not immediately felt for the Rime. And the second thing to note is many of the friends of the mariner, even though he's acutely aware from his conscience that what he has done, he's killed the bird, his friends come along and say, well, the bird was the problem. The bird was the reason we were in the land of the ice and the snow. And so you were right to kill the bird because it was the very thing that prevented us from achieving our goal, from reaching our destination. And so not only did things seem to be going well, there were no serious consequences other than the tender conscience of the mariner knowing something was not right. But his friends just affirmed what he had done. So always to be wary of friends who are not discerning, friends who affirm decisions that in fact lead eventually to questionable and perhaps tragic consequences in life's journey. So beware of the friends we have. If they themselves do not have soft, tender, listening consciences, they can actually affirm a questionable activity in thought, word, or deed that will in time lead to sad or tragic consequences. So part two opens with this notion that the weather seems to continue well, the ship seems to be doing well, the consequences of killing the albatross seem to be unfolding fine, but time, as it were, the whirligig of time has a way of winnowing all things. And sometimes things do not happen, or the consequences immediately, but this winnowing takes place over a period of time. That's what Colerodge is working at in part 2 of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Beware of certain decisions, that the impact only comes to haunt us over a period of time. But our conscious can tell us we've done something inappropriate, but the consequences of that inappropriate action only visit us within months or years. And be wary of friends who affirm something we do that we know, in fact, in the depths of our soul, that is inappropriate. And so Coleridge is warning people to who are your friends and who are you on the ship with? Whose ship are you on and where is that ship going? So as part 2 continues, then of course the conditions start changing, the consequences start emerging. And just as in part 1 and 2, Coleridge uses very raw and stark images, some of frigid nature, so people become frozen inside and they can't move. There's no warmth to them, and there's a tightening up within them. There's also the parched nature, of course, as they're sailing across the water of time. They're paralyzed as people, so he uses the image of almost a painted ship, and a picture's not moving anymore. And so throughout a certain period of time, what occurs is going on is, as a result of decisions, the soul becomes paralyzed. It lacks the ability to sail anymore. And so there's this interior sense of you can look at the metaphor of freezing ice, icebergs as well, or just a parched inner life, a desert of an inner life. There's no life to it anymore. And so what Coleridge is doing is, first of all, one applies these metaphors internally, decisions made then can lead to a sense of inner paralysis, a going nowhere. And then as a result of that then leads to, so what am I doing with my life? Where am I going with my life? Am I going anywhere with my life? This is the state of the ship. Where's the ship going? Is the ship going anywhere? A constant metaphor in part 2 is the notion of silence. So what happens when people make decisions that are questionable? A deep silence in terms of searching for the answers. How do I find my way out? Is there anyone who can guide me to speak a word of wisdom? Well, the mariner's turned away from all of that. He shot the albatross, has friends who are not listening to what's going on internally. So silence and silence and silence. And so how does a person navigate when there is no word of life being given to the soul? And that can happen too. Is there any, in terms of people making decisions, and then they live with the suffering, the tragedy, is God there at all? There's just silence. Well, to what degree is the silence come from humans that have made decisions that lead to silence, and they can't hear anymore? They lack the ability to hear, and so the ears become very waxed. And so the language of silence Coleridge is going to work on. The multiplicity of metaphors in part 2, they come from a variety of directions, but they're all dealing with the same issue: paralysis, a slowing down, a not knowing how to navigate. And so the consequences of poor decisions, reaffirmed by friends, and then of course the albatross at the end of part 2, which is on his neck rather than the cross. And usually the cross is really the story about not killing the albatross. The whole, obviously, the Christian story of the cross is about letting go, about dying to what we are not, so we may emerge in terms of who we actually are. But what happens when we kill the albatross of actually who we are? And then what is hung around our neck is no more the truth of the cross, it's the truth of the albatross. And so it's very significant that part 2 ends with the mariner having the albatross around his neck, and this becomes who he is. He becomes shackled by the albatross. And so the very thing that once that guided the ship across the water of time through also very difficult situations. Part 1 is about the albatross and the wind taking him across, he and the other people on the ship, across the water of time in difficult situations. But when the albatross is killed, the cross drops away, and the albatross becomes the new cross, but it's a cross, in fact, that is increasingly killing the mariner and those on the ship. And Colerodge will pick up more and more and explore that more in actual section 3 of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Increasingly so, it's almost like going to Dante's Inferno, and section 3, 4, 5, and to some degree 6, it's going into the depths, in fact, where that which we are not needs to be burned away. And so the nature of the mariner and those on the ship, that whole element of who he thought he was, what he had done, it's a process of it being burned. So in fact, who he actually is going to begin to emerge. But that comes later in the ballad itself. But significant, the final few lines of section 2 are about the albatross and naming the albatross and thing that has been done. And until the mariner actually can be honest and say, this is what I have done, confession in the old classical sense, this is what I have done, and now I'm living with the consequences, then the next step forward cannot occur. And so it takes a certain level of interior rawness and transparency and honesty, which will emerge in next sections of the Rime and the Ancient Mariner. But significant to reflect on the albatross hanging around the neck of his soul, and the cross, which is a very different symbolic meaning, disappearing for a short season. So we'll move on to section 3, next section, as we begin to see how this story of formation unfolds as the mariner and the crew, what happens to them and how they find their way again. But still, it's not something that can occur quickly. In fact, it's a process of going deeper and deeper, dark night of the soul, cloud of unknowing, disorienting both internally and externally. And so Colerodge is tracking, in that sense, the nature of the journey of transformation. But there's no silver bullet or snake oil that gets a person immediately out of difficult circumstances, that by certain decisions that have led to those circumstances, it sometimes can be a very painful, extremely painful process. It sometimes can take years in a person's life to finally work through. And so this is what Coleridge is getting at in his own life, also as a reflection of that in his 20s and 30s, some decisions he made as well. So next time will be section 3 in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner.